So what is the unbeatable tactic on Football Manager? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you the player rules, player instructions, and team instructions that you need to actually build that tactic. Now, it's possible to actually go unbeaten on Football Manager, but I'm going to be really honest with you. You're going to need a very good team to actually do that, and I'm currently managing Atletico Madrid right now. I do have a lot of good players, but that's on the side. So let's get into the tactic. So you can't just plug it into the system and then expect that your players are going to give you magical results straight away. You actually need to train them to play this tactic. So first, you're going to have a sweeper keeper in goal, and your sweeper keeper is going to play on attack DT. Now you can use him to play on support DT, but I do favor the attacking role because he has that counter-attacking ability, and if your player has good eccentricity, it's going to help a whole lot. So you can either have sweeper keeper on support or attack. I'm just going to set it to attack, and then if the goalkeeper has that starting counter attacks player trait, very good for you. Now for your ball playing defender, you're going to want him to shoot less. You're going to want him to shoot less, dribble less, pass it shorter, tackle harder, and stay wider. Now, both ball-playing defenders have the similar instructions, so if you go ahead and check it, they have the similar instructions. For the fullbacks, the one on the right, you're going to want him to play as an inverted wing-back on support duty. All you want him to do is to go ahead and take more risk because he's going to act like a playmaker on that side, the kind of how Trent Alexander-Arnold does. He's going to take more risk, he's going to shoot less often, he's also going to tackle harder. For the left back, he's also going to be an inverted wing-back on support, and he has similar instructions to take more risk, shoot less often, and tackle harder. Now, the next player that we're going to look at is the box-to-box midfielder, and I think he's the player that has the most instructions. The reason for that is because he's going to act like a defensive midfielder as well as an attacking midfielder in this team. So it works really well in that sense, and he's also going to somehow behave like a playmaker, but we're going to get to that. If we look at the box-to-box midfielder's instructions, he's going to pass it shorter, and he's also going to take more risk. He's also going to dribble more, shoot less often, get further forward, move into channels, close down more, tackle harder, and mark tighter. So he's doing pretty much everything in central midfield without being that much of a holding midfielder. Now beside him, you're going to have the main playmaker in the team. This player is going to be a roaming playmaker on support DT. He's going to act like a heartbeat of the team. And if you go over to his instructions, all you're going to ask him to do is to play more direct passes, shoot less often, tackle harder, and mark tighter. So those are the only instructions for your playmaker. Now for the two wide players, I do sometimes prefer them to be side by side with the playmakers in central midfield like this, but if you want to be a bit more adventurous, you can actually pull them to stay in the attacking region and play as a 4-2-4. So basically you have two variants of the same tactic. You can actually use a defensive version where you have your central midfielders or your left midfielder on this other side, slightly closer to the defense, and then you can also have them in an attacking phase like this. Now for their player instructions, you want your winger to be a bit more attacking and a bit more defensive at the same time. So this is what's going to happen. If you look at his player instructions, you're going to ask him to take more risk and also cross on the byline. I do like this instruction in FM24 because if the player is playing all the way down here, he's also going to get far ahead and try to play a cut back into the box for somebody to score a tap in. You also want him to hold his position, which means he's not going to drift into the left or to the right and try to get into another position. You also want him to close down more so you can stay on his fullback and try to press the fullback and win possession for the team. He's also going to tackle harder and mark tighter. Now both wingers have the same instructions. Now in attack is where there's a lot of variation that can actually come. You can use an advanced forward on the deep line forward, but I do prefer double advanced forward in this sense. Is where I actually got the most results using this tactic. The original version is actually advanced forward, but I kind of tweaked it to have a deep line forward in there because I like doing stupid stuff on Football Manager. You're going to want your advanced forward to take more risk. He's also going to dribble more. He's going to mark tighter. He's going to tackle harder. The reason why you're going to set these instructions for him is because you also want him to act somehow like a playmaker in case he's in a position where he can actually play a through ball. He's going to go ahead and do that. He's also going to lead the line and carry the ball into the opposition's defense. That's why we have the dribble more instructions set for him. And both advanced forward have the same instructions. Now, the reason why they have the tackle harder and mark tighter instructions is because sometimes the striker can forget that they're actually supposed to press the opposition's defenders. So you sort of just trigger them to do that a lot more when you have the tackle harder and mark tighter instructions selected. Now we'll go into the team instructions then, and when the team is out of possession, what you want them to do is actually play with a high press and of course a high defensive line. But the trigger press in this sense is going to be all the way up to much more often trigger press. The reason is because we have the numbers up front and we can actually hassle the opposition into losing possession of the ball. This actually works very well against a 4-3-3 system because the 4-3-3 allows, or it has more than 4 players, that's the back 4 and the defensive midfielder, that can actually play out from the back very easily. But in case you have the numbers to hassle them early, you can win possession back before they start playing out from the back. A few more instructions to add. You want them to also prevent the short goalkeeper distribution, and then you also want to trap the opposition outside. The reason why you're doing this is so you can have a compact block in middle and then have the since it's a 4-4-2, you want to show the oppositions to the flanks because you don't want it to come into the middle where you have only 2 players in there. You want to show them out wide as possible and try to defend on that side. Now with the transition, there is some variation here. You're going to want to ask the team to counter press because we're pressing really high in this sense. It works well with counter attacks, but the goalkeeper is where I do like to make some variation. If you have a goalkeeper that is not very good at kicking, you can ask him to roll it out and roll it out to the fullbacks. If a goalkeeper is better at kicking or taking short kicks or good passing, you can ask him to play the ball to the fullbacks by just taking short kicks. But I do prefer the roll it out instructions. For the distribution speed, distributing it quickly or slowing the pace down, it doesn't really matter in this sense. Having just these two is all that it needs. Now when you're in possession, you're going to want the team to pass into space a lot because you're going to want to take advantage of the space vacated by the opposition, especially if you're playing with a flat midfield where your 2 wingers are slightly closer to the fullbacks. Having that pass into space instructions really help you exploit the space behind your position. You also want your team to play with slightly shorter passing, but you want your tempo to be really quick. You want to get into the opposition's faces as quickly as possible. Now when it comes to crossing, I know that low crosses are quite a thing this year. You can actually have low crosses turned on. It kind of increases your chances of having those cutbacks into the middle of the box where a player can score a tap in. But I've usually had it on mixed crosses because my players are so good and I have a tall player, so I can't really force a low cross for a tall player, so I kind of just leave it on mixed crosses. But I'm going to just set it to low crosses here in case you don't have a tall player and you want the genuine system originally as it is. So low crosses for you. Another instruction I play around with is the walk the ball into the box instruction. You can have it turned on. By default it's turned on, but usually I take it off because I want my team to be a bit more creative and try different things. But you can have it in case you're struggling to create chances, you're struggling to score goals. Having that walk the ball into the box instruction just helps your team try to come up better with chances. Another instruction is to run a defense. This is by default supposed to be in there, but like I said, it's something that you can take off if you notice that your team is pushing into the opposition too much and they're not getting any results out of all that aggressive pressing and all. So you can take that off when that time comes. Now the last but not the least is the mentality. By default, you can actually use the attacking mentality for this tactic. That's the way it was set up to go. But sometimes the way Football Manager is, I do prefer just starting with the balanced mentality, especially if you're using a smaller team, that you're not one of the bigger teams in the league and you want to just be patient and kind of observe the match and see what is happening and then adjust along the way. You can use a balanced mentality, but more often than not, the attacking mentality does work and it has been giving me good results so far. And I also learned in Football Manager that even if you're using a team like Portsmouth in the Premier League, let's say you just got promoted to the Premier League and you're Portsmouth, playing an attacking mentality doesn't mean that you're going to be too exposed. Sometimes it means that your team is going to take a lot more risk. So if you set up your team well defensively, you can play with an attacking mentality and not get overly exposed at the back. So that is the complete system now in detail. I do hope that you got all the information. In case you have any additional questions, do let me know. I hope you have as much fun with this tactic as I have in Football Manager, and in case you do, so you can't just plug it into the system and then expect that your players are going to give you magical results straight away. You actually need to train them to play this tactic. So most of these players would be available in your team, and when it comes to the roaming playmaker and the box-to-box midfielder, you do need to check the player roles that are available for that. I'm just going to click a player in here and drop one in and see how that actually works out. According to my team, the best player here is João Veloso. If I go ahead and look at João Veloso in here, I can just check his attributes. You can see here that he's suited to play as a central midfielder, but I'm just going to just scroll down a little bit to roaming playmaker and select. You can see that there are highlighted attributes for the roaming playmaker, and you can see the ones in blue are the ones in blue are quite good, and then the ones in green are absolutely necessary for this role, and he has those attributes. So even if you're in the lower leagues, you can scale it down a little bit, maybe 12 or 13. If the player has those attributes in green that are about 12 or 13, they're quite good and he could be able to play that role. So it doesn't always mean that if the player is not naturally gifted as a roaming playmaker, he won't be able to play the role. He will still be able to play the role. For inverted wing backs, I've been hearing that you sometimes want the player to have his favorite foot on the inside. That's have an inverted wing back that is a right footer playing on the left hand side. That's possible, you can actually do that, but I've also had good results having a right footed player play on the right side as an inverted wing back, and he's still able to cut inside and play through balls just the way Trent Alexander-Arnold does at Liverpool. He's not left footed, he's right footed, but he still sometimes play as an inverted wing back. So that's something you can actually consider when selecting players and bringing players in. Let me know how the tactic works out for you. I'll see you in the next video.